Hi.
morning.
Good morning. See, I'm not at home.
Good morning.
Hello.
You're not at home?
I am San Diego
Oh, nice.
visiting Dina today and tomorrow.
I wish I was there. I, I haven't seen my son who lives close by in a long time.
Yeah, well, we're both vaccinated now. Actually, though, Tracy is up by you.
Ah, I
She's,
wish he would contact me. I'd love to.
I think she might be able to now. Well, I'm not, excuse me. I don't know what the rules are at your place. What are your rules?
My rules are I go with the mask and I can meet people. I go
Yeah,
to my kid's house all the time, so
she's she is definitely going to be able to do that now, and
great.
she's actually up for a promotion right now. Her boss just retired, so she might be.
Oh, so you can retire, Rabbi.
I'm going to
No,
retire.
no, no.
No, I'm not going to retire. No, she's she's worked at the company for a really long time, and she is going to hopefully take her next step. I have Ryder with me though, so you might hear the dog. No, but he's been really good. He actually, we came down yesterday, and he's here.
So there's hotels down there that allow dogs?
I think a lot of hotels now are allowing dogs.
I know La Quinta does.
Yeah, this is a double tree, but a lot of the Hiltons are now, and I'm seeing it. I'm seeing people traveling with their dogs a lot right now. Well, plus you can go to restaurants. Most restaurants, people are sitting there with their dogs, and they're that's really common now with the outdoor dining. I think.
Oh yeah, we even before that, we used to go when we lived in Sedona, we'd go sit on the patio and bring the pup.
I've
So
had better luck with, especially if you have a large dog with Airbnb.
really,
Yeah, much cleaner than hotels that regularly allow dogs.
interesting. I never thought of this before, and now obviously we are.
Now it's
I think they charged me $65, but interestingly, they didn't charge me $65 until this morning. When I took the dog out this morning, they said your dog was barking yesterday, and I think it was a punishment fee. I think if the dog hadn't barked, we would have been fine. But he wasn't that bad. He only barked not one time, but for one set of times. But yeah, we had to pay, but it wasn't. I mean, it was 65. It was $65. It wasn't a huge issue, but
Now they only allow downstairs, right? You're on the first floor.
no,
No,
I'm on the fifth floor.
because we go to this hotel usually when we see the kids in Illinois, and the Drury Inn, which is really a great place, only allow dogs on the first floor.
Well, we were talking about you yesterday, Mike. I was talking to Rich Tabak, and we were talking. He was sitting outside. He was Zooming, and he showed the sunset from his backyard. And I said, I see the sunset all the time from Mike Schwartz's backyard. He posts all the time. I think Mike Schwartz is the only person who likes the views from his backyard better here than in Sedona. But
Exactly.
I was joking a little bit, but you do love I mean, you have a great backyard. You have a great view. I mean, you have a great.
We view your house.
Well, I don't know if that's the best view, but yes, you have a good view.
Yeah, we have a great view.
We had a little view from our bedroom until they built the houses. So for about 4 months, we had a good view out of our back. But
you should, really, from your front, you should have a decent view of the sunrise over them, don't you?
Yeah, sunrise we do. So depending on the time of year and how early I'm up, sometimes there's a nice sunrise. It's not fantastic. It's impeded by a few places, but it's not bad. Yeah, it definitely has a good sunrise, and it is nice to see. It'd be nice to have a house with both, I don't even care what it's of, but just to be able to see sunrise and sunset as you go through your life, as you go through the year and be able to see those things. It's
Or
really
you should see the sunsets well, you were at the Grand Canyon recently, and you were in the North Rim, right?
Yeah.
No, you're in the South Rim?
Yeah. But again, it all depends on what time. We didn't get there for sunset. We got there for sunrise, but it wasn't. Sunrise is not the same there, I don't think. Maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe it was just cloudy that day or something, but it was. Or
But the
foggy.
North Rim sunset is the best, the best on the North Rim.
Nice. Well, that's good to know too. But yeah, it really depends again on what time of year you go, and obviously if you're there in the summertime, you're not going to see it until 8:30, 9 o'clock. You won't see it. But
Which is great, because after you go hiking, you just, you have yourself a cocktail and sit out there and watch the sunset.
Yeah. No, but you guys have a great point. Is if you're not friends with the Schwartzes on Facebook, you're missing out some great sunset pictures of Santa Clarita. You really are. You guys have a great view.
It's funny because Arizona sunsets are just incredible. But this year has been better here than in Arizona. This year's been incredible.
Well, we will. Yesterday we went to Dog Beach and had our dog run around. He ran around the beach down at Ocean Beach.
Oh, how'd he do?
He did pretty good. I guess he had been there. We got him in San Diego, so he's a San Diego dog.
Right, okay.
He's from Fallbrook, but he likes it down at the beach. So who knew? He's a beach dog. But no, he ran around. The only thing he did that kind of bothered me is he went over to someone's water and he drank all their water. But the dog owner said it was okay, but I felt very embarrassed that he drank all the other dog's water. So I guess that happens. Seems kind of rude, but there was nothing I could do. It was too late. Once he got his mouth in there, and I had a little thing like a portable. I have this like thing that opens up, and a plastic thing, a rubber thing that opens up, and you fill water in it. But he doesn't like it. He likes a bowl. He likes a metal bowl. He's a snob. It's like he doesn't like to. He's like a wine snob. He likes to have his water out of a metal bowl. So
If you drink it straight out of the bottle, mine will.
really,
So is mine. Mine will do the same thing. He loves drinking out of the bottle.
I don't think he'll. Maybe I guess if he's drunk, if he's thirsty enough. But
He's drunk enough.
he went right.
I wouldn't say it never spills, but no, you don't have to. I discovered I didn't have to pour it in a bowl. He'll just happily take it right out of the plastic bottle.
I'll see if he'll do that. But even at home, I noticed that if we have a plastic bowl and a metal bowl, he likes that. I think he likes the sound of the water in the metal bowl. Isn't that weird? I don't know. I think
it stays colder in the metal bowl.
maybe
I
that too.
have had two dogs that have done that. So
See, my dog loves the outside water more than the inside water, because we have a bowl both inside and out, and he'd rather drink from the outside.
No, and I'm telling you, this dog knew I had tap water and I had a little Arrowhead bottle, and he drank the Arrowhead bottle. He didn't drink the other bottle. I've got this little thing right here. I fill up. It's one of these things folds up. It's a foldable.
Yep.
He's not. Unless I put
I missed this part. Where are you?
I'm in San Diego. I'm visiting Dina. I'm here with Dina. Well, she's going to come over here this morning. We're going to hang out with Dina. So it's nice. It's nice. Nice. And as I was saying, Tracy's up north, so we're accumulating points again. Hilton. Anyways, but no, it's actually it was like $80.
And you have the dog?
Yeah, it was $80. I have the dog. Dog, come here. No, come here.
Wow.
I know you don't believe. I just showed you the bowl. Here, dog.
Well, I'm stunned, Mark. You have to understand.
I'm stunned too. It's all very weird. We live in weird times.
In the betting pool, I have the dog will have you wrapped around his finger or paw or whatever by Passover. So I may win.
I gave the dog a bath yesterday. Well, he went to the beach, so I had to give him a bath. So yeah, it doesn't even matter if I like the dog. I'm now spending way too much time attending to the animal, but it is a cute dog. Anyways, I am now spending way more time on this dog than I thought I would. Anyways, on that note, I'm going to turn it over to my friend Rosemary in a moment. We are so close to getting across the Red Sea, but we haven't yet. We're perilously close. We're like the Israelites themselves, trying to get to the Red Sea, trying to get through, but we're stuck. And I really do. Oh man, yeah. I'm looking at the comments. I'm gonna start sharing this. We had a really fun time on Sunday with the Purim virtual Purim Carnival that we managed to put for everybody. Quite frankly, Tracy did 90% of it, but yeah, we had a virtual Purim Carnival, and Tracy did a cooking demo with Hometosh, and she's getting really good at that now. And then we had CBS did something, Chabad did something. It was nice. It was a combined effort, and we were talking about how the fact that last year this was the last event that we did really live was the Purim Carnival. And gosh, it seemed like a long time ago.
Yeah.
My goodness. All right. So I'm trying
Just
to,
about, what would you say, 12 lunar months and 11?
yeah, it was 12 lunar months. 12 lunar months ago. Yeah, on the lunar year. I'm just telling you, it's been a long year. But
Yeah.
I don't know why this isn't going up there, but whatever. I apologize to people.
Rabbi, Thursday's little Purim thing, how long is it gonna last, do you think?
I'm guessing about an hour, 45. I will know more soon, but probably about 45 minutes. Not an hour, but close.
Okay, just curious.
I would think probably, yeah. We're working hard on that actually, and it is much harder and much more time consuming than if we had done it, than if we were doing it live. So we posted up Tracy's part, or most of the Sunday event we posted up, and then we're also posting up on. We're going to post up Thursdays in case you don't get to participate live. We'll post it up, and you'll be able to see it because Wendy has worked really hard on this, and she's got friends involved. There's people there's Beth and Me members that aren't even in Santa Clarita anymore that are taking part in it. I don't want to ruin that surprise. But yeah, it's pretty cool. So I don't understand why this isn't going live, but that being said, we're going to get started. Yeah, so that's Thursday at 7 is the, is the, well, it says it's live streaming, but it's not.
It's not.
1 second. Jeff Stein, why is there a Bronco jersey on your shirt? What's that about? I'm going to have to find out what happened to Jeff Stein. It didn't take him very long before he
No. Works just a backrest. Just saying, use it in the yard when it get dirty. It's great.
All right.
No.
It's a little disconcerted. I was just a little disconcerted. I mean,
I had to go give the dog a treat. That's why I had to get up.
I'm a little shocked. No, but look, it's a very big deal in Denver. Bronco football is a religion. Actually,
Absolutely.
I was told by Orthodox Jews that it's a religion, and you don't compete with Broncos Sunday in Denver. So I'm gonna try this one more time.
Yeah.
And it is, see, it's weird. It's saying that I have to put a title, which I've never had to before, and it's still not. Okay, well, whatever. I tried. So apologies to Zoom folk, or to Facebook folk, but you'll have to come on Zoom. Could be a internet pro. By the way, I was yesterday. Spectrum went out. Fortunately, I wasn't at home, but Spectrum cable went out in the middle of people streaming stuff all over the place in Santa Clarita, and I guess it was about 5:30. No, probably about 6 o'clock. and everybody.
Oh,
It was down for about
ours did
45
too.
minutes.
We don't have Spectrum, and ours did too.
Oh, really?
What do you have?
I don't know.
Well, I know
I just know it wasn't working, and it's not Spectrum.
AT&T didn't go out, but Spectrum did. So I don't know. It was just weird how people who were on the call dropped off all at the same time. It was kind of weird. It was like
Yeah, it was crazy.
it was like
It was out.
It was like people got raptured. No, I mean, because I was on a group thing, and everyone, all of a sudden, like 10 people disappeared, and it was scary. Anyways, because I wasn't there. But anyways, we're gonna turn it over to Rosemary. I'm glad it was just a brief pause, but who would have ever thought that our internet connection would be probably the most important thing we'd be thinking about? But all right, I'm going to share this up here for everybody, and
Just
yeah.
went all blurry. Oh, there it comes.
Yeah, I thought I had to optimize it, but maybe not. All right, so we're actually going to go through the Red Sea today. And what's interesting, of course, is that we actually read this Torah portion a couple weeks ago, B'Shalach. And some of this Midrash you might have heard before because it's pretty famous, some of the text about this really important event. So needless to say, the Midrash was very famous because the event is so famous. And so the legends about it some of them are pretty well known. And we talked about, again, to refresh people's memory, some of the themes in this are that Israel has its own angel, defending angel, Michael, representative angel, our emissary in heaven. And then other nations have angels, including the Egyptians. So even our enemies have angels. Which is an interesting way of kind of explaining why sometimes countries are waxing and waning in strength, because their angels are able to be victorious or be successful. It kind of allows for God to be a little less responsible for what happens to some extent by having the angels, these representative angels at play. But again, it's a recognition that every nation is God's responsibility to some extent, though, as we see this week and in the discussions about Israel, in other discussions, the difference is that we have God that'll sometimes intervene with us. And so the angels, it really doesn't matter what they do when you're fighting against God, because in the end, the boss wins. And that's one of the themes that we've been reading it again today. And then, of course, we're going to read, as miraculous as the Red Sea was parting in the Torah, the Midrash takes it to whole new levels. And literally, like some of this description you're going to see, makes the movies look silly. So it's pretty wild. So let's take a look. This is the what it was like for our ancestors.
On the morning after the eventful night, though the sea was not yet made dry land, the Israelites, full of trust in God, were ready to cast themselves into its waters. The tribes contended with one another for the honor of being the first to jump. Without waiting the outcome of the wordy strife, the tribe of Benjamin sprang in, and the princes of Judah were so incensed at having been deprived of preeminence in danger that they pelted the Benjaminites with stones. God knew that the Judeans and the Benjamites were animated by a praiseworthy purpose. The ones, like the others, desired but to magnify the name of God, and he rewarded both tribes. In Benjamin's allotment, the Shekinah took up her residence, and the royalty of Israel was conferred upon Judah.
So, according to this Midrash, the tribes were fighting over who could go in first. Not exactly the picture that was originally painted, but I guess the point is once they know a miracle is going to happen, or once they know that God is actually going to protect them, or they believe it, whatever you want to say, then there's a fight for who gets to go in first. And they actually fight amongst each other, hitting each other with rocks. But the Midrash says that they're both meritus of, they wanted to do it not because they wanted to be the first, but because they wanted to magnify God's greatness. And so for that, both tribes got these wonderful rewards. Benjamin is where Jerusalem is, in the tribe of Benjamin, but the king is from King David is from the tribe of Judah. So both tribes get rewarded back to that point. That's one of the, again, there's not really a basis for this in the Torah, but it explains why those things happen later on. All right, so a little bit more about that.
When God saw the two tribes in the ways of the sea, he called upon Moses and said, "My beloved are in danger of drowning, and you stand by and pray. Bid Israel go forward, and you lift up your rod over the sea and divide it." Thus it happened, and Israel passed through the sea with its water cleft in twain.
Yeah, so Moses wasn't working fast enough, according to this midrash, which there are other midrashim that kind of say the same thing. It's all based on the fact that the midrash says that Moses was literally praying and holding his staff over the water all night. Now, on the face of it, it seems like that's how long it took the miracle to happen. It actually was a really big thing for the waters to move, and it didn't just happen instantaneously. But the midrash actually kind of lays the responsibility for why it didn't split fast enough on Moses, that Moses was somehow not working fast enough, that it was on Moses. Well, again, I guess it goes back to the idea that couldn't God just split the sea immediately? How this splits is also an interesting issue, which you're now going to read quite a lot about how the sea itself would actually split.
The dividing of the sea was but the first of 10 miracles connected with the passage of the Israelites through it. The others were that the waters united in a vault above their heads, 12 paths opened up, one for each of the tribes. The water became transparent as glass, and each tribe could see the others. The soil underfoot was dry, but it changed into clay when the Egyptians stepped upon it. The walls of water transformed into rocks, against which the Egyptians were thrown and dashed to death, while before the Israelites could slake their thirst. And finally, the 10th wonder was that this drinking water was congealed in the heart of the sea as soon as they had satisfied their need.
Yeah.
And,
So okay, you can read the next paragraph too.
okay. And there were other miracles besides. The sea yielded the Israelites whatever their hearts desired. If a child cried as it lay in the arms of its mother, she needed but to stretch out her hand and pluck an apple or some fruit and quiet it. The waters were piled up to the height of 1,600 miles, and they could be seen by all the nations of the earth.
Yeah. So it wasn't just that the water split, but the waters actually, according to the Torah, it says that there was a wall on both sides. That's what the Torah says. So how high was the wall? Well, according to the Midrash, the wall went all the way up to the sky. It was like nothing that anyone had ever seen before. And it wasn't just that the waters parted once, they parted a dozen times, each lane for the different Israelite tribe to pass through. You wonder, like, well, wasn't it miraculous enough? Not according to the Midrash. According to the Midrash, that's only the surface of it. Like, you're only hearing the rough details of it. What was so amazing about it was that all of these things happened. Now, all of these things are kind of based on the fact that the Israelites, other things happened to them, and also to the Egyptians. That the Torah says that the Egyptians were dashed on the rocks. Well, on the face of it, it would make sense that they just got dashed on the rocks by the side of the water. No, the Midrash says the water itself became like rock, and they were dashed on the water. The water in some places turned into fresh water so that people could drink. That's pretty crazy. That's pretty amazing that there was fresh water for people to drink. And not only that, people could get food out of the water. They literally just, whatever they wanted, stuck in their hand, took it out, and it was an amazing, whatever they could imagine. So this is not just waters parting. This is like a whole nother level that you would never even imagine when you read the Torah, that the Midrash explains that these kinds of things happen. And again, there are people who think that this is in the Torah. It's not. It's based on lines in the Torah that say, you know, they walk through on dry land. But, and of course, the Egyptians, it says their chariots got stuck. Well, that's a miracle if you think about it, that, you know, a few minutes before it's solid ground, and then the next minute the chariots can't hold it. But you can make the argument chariots are heavier, and so it makes sense that chariots couldn't get through, and people, you know, could walk through, but chariots couldn't. But not in the Torah's mind. In the Torah's mind, no, it was special. And not only that, the water was above them. It wasn't just underneath them or on the sides of them. It was actually above them. So it was literally like, you know, a glass, almost a tunnel of water, like glass. So it's, you know, the imagination of what this was like far, far exceeds what the Torah description of it is. And of course, the fact that everybody in the world could see it. It wasn't just the Egyptians who were there who saw it. It wasn't just the Israelites. Everyone could see what was happening in that moment. And again, it was so supernatural. It was so upending of the natural order. And it wasn't just people who were alive who got to see it. Listen to this.
The great wonder of Israel's passage through the sea took place in the presence of the three fathers and the six mothers, for God had fetched them out of their graves to the shores of the Red Sea to be witnesses of the marvelous deeds wrought in behalf of their children.
Wow. So the patriarchs and matriarchs, and by the way, here it also has the six mothers, meaning including Bilhah and Zilpah. Interesting. That they get to see their descendants cross over. They're brought back from the dead to see it, to witness it. That's pretty wild too. I mean, that's amazing that people have to be brought back to see this. What are they doing in their graves that they're hundreds of years later, that they're still there? It's kind of weird, but they're reanimated, if you will, to see this brought back. So it's not just people who are alive who get to see it, but some very special people who had passed get to see it too. Pretty wild. Pretty wild. All right.
Wonderful as were the miracles connected with the rescue of the Israelites from the waters of the sea, those performed when the Egyptians were drowned were no less remarkable. First of all, God felt called upon to defend Israel's cause before it was the angel of the Egyptians, who would not allow his people to perish in the waters of the sea. He appeared on the spot at the very moment when God wanted to drown the Egyptians, and he spoke, "O Lord of the world, you are called just and upright, and before you there is no wrong, no forgetting, no respecting of persons. Why then do you desire to make my children perish in the sea? Can you say that my children drowned or slew a single one of yours? If it be on account of the rigorous slavery that my children imposed upon Israel, then consider that your children have received their wages and that they took their silver and gold vessels from them."
So here's a weird scene, which goes back to the angels, and specifically the angel of the Egyptians, Uzzah. And he is arguing on behalf of his people. He says, God, you can't destroy my people. Why would you kill my people? And he says, they didn't kill your people, which of course isn't really true. Though you can make the argument that this generation enslaved the people. They maybe were not the ones who slew the Jewish boys in the Nile, but it's a weird case he's making, which is the Egyptians paid us now. And so you can't claim that they were slaves, that they took advantage of them because they paid them now. It's a weird argument. It's not obviously a very good argument. You know that it's not going to work, but it shows you that God allows for a defense to be made for the Egyptians. Now, of course, God, it already says, is acting on our behalf. So one of God's angels is Uzzah is in the unenviable position of arguing with his boss. It's not going to go well, needless to say. You don't want to argue with your boss. Let's read what happens.
Then God convoked all the members of his celestial family, and he spoke to the angel hosts. Judge you in truth between me and yonder Uzzah, the angel of the Egyptians. At the first I brought a famine upon his people, and I appointed my friend Joseph over them, who saved them through his sagacity, and they all became his slaves. Then my children went down into their land as strangers in consequence of the famine, and they made the children of Israel to serve with rigor in all manner of hard work there is in the world. They groaned on account of their bitter service, and their cry rose up to me. And I sent Moses and Aaron, my faithful messengers, to Pharaoh. When they came before the king of Egypt, they spoke to him. Thus said the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go, that they may hold a feast unto me in the wilderness. In the presence of the kings of the east and of the west, the sinner began to boast, saying, who is the Lord that I should hearken to his voice to let Israel go? Why comes he not before me, like all the kings of the world? And why does he not bring me a present, like the others? This God of whom you speak, I know him not at all. Wait, and let me search my lists, and see whether I can find his name. But his servants said, we have heard that he is the son of the wise, the son of ancient kings. Then Pharaoh asked my messengers, what are the works of this God? And they replied, he is the God of gods, the Lord of lords, who created the heaven and the earth. But Pharaoh doubted their words and said, there is no God in all the world that can accomplish such works besides me, for I made myself and I made the Nile River. Because he denied me thus, I sent 10 plagues upon him, and he was compelled to let my children go. Yet in spite of all, he did not leave off from his wicked ways, and he tried to bring them back under his bondage. Now, seeing all that has happened to him and that he will not acknowledge me as God and Lord, does he not deserve to be drowned in the sea with his host?
So God himself makes the case against Pharaoh and against it seems to be more against Pharaoh, but against Pharaoh and his armies. It's maybe not so much against the Egyptians, but it's all brought in there. I guess you could make the argument. It's all goes back to the beginning. The weird thing, of course, is that the most obvious reason why the Egyptians can be drowned in the sea is that they drowned Israelite children isn't even brought up. Like that's the most obvious justice is that, right? That's what needs to be remedied. Instead, what God says is that Pharaoh doubts me. So he doubted my power, and that's why he deserves to be destroyed. I gave him numerous chances, and he continued to doubt my power. So that's why he deserves to be destroyed. So it's not even so much for what he had done to the Israelites, though it is mentioned, though we can make the argument the most grievous problem God doesn't mention. And he gets back to the fact that he doubts God. And for that, again, here's what the angels say.
The celestial family called out when the Lord had ended his defense. You have every right to drown him in the sea. Wow.
So needless to say, the rest of the angels go drowning. The guy has to be punished. Now again, is it Pharaoh? Is it all the Egyptians that need to be punished? I mean, who's going to be punished here? And wait a second. There's the bigger issue of you killed people, Pharaoh. You actually killed people. And that hasn't been addressed. Let's watch what happens.
Uzzah heard their verdict, and he said, "O Lord of all the worlds, I know that my people deserve the punishment you have decreed, but may it please you to deal with them according to your attribute of mercy and take pity upon the work of your hands, for your tender mercies are over all your works.
Wow. So the angel does something very, very smart here, which appeals to God's mercy and says, God, but you're a merciful God. You can't destroy your people. You can't destroy them. The Egyptians are your works too. They're your people. So
Almost the Lord had yielded to Uzzah's entreaties when Michael gave a sign to Gabriel that made him fly to Egypt swiftly and fetch thence a brick for which a Hebrew child had been used as a mortar. Holding this incriminating object in his hand, Gabriel stepped into the presence of God and said, "O Lord of the world, will you have compassion with the accursed nation that has slaughtered your children so cruelly?" It just all went blurry on me. It's coming back. There. Then the Lord turned himself away from his attribute of mercy, and seating himself upon his throne of justice, he resolved to drown the Egyptians in the sea.
yeah, we'll read the last paragraph.
The first upon whom judgment was executed was the angel of Egypt. Uzzah was thrown into the sea. A similar fate overtook Rahab, the angel of the sea, with his hosts. Rahab had made intercession before God in behalf of the Egyptians. He had said, "Why should you drown the Egyptians? Let it suffice that the Israelites, that you have saved them out of the hand of their masters." At that, God dealt Rahab and his army a blow under which they staggered and fell dead. And then he cast their corpses in the sea, whence its unpleasant odor.
So there we have a little explanation for why the sea smelled bad, which is that the angel of the sea, Rahab, who's usually depicted as a sea monster, that angel gets destroyed too. So two angels speak out. Uzzah, the angel of the Egyptians, the protector angel, but also the angel of the sea. You can make the argument that the sea angel is like, why are you messing with me? I don't deserve this. Haven't you done enough? Doesn't matter. He got on the wrong side. Rahab got on the wrong side of this argument. And so God got so mad at Uzzah that Uzzah gets destroyed too. So I don't know, it's a cautionary tale to angels, national angels too. But you can see Michael and Gabriel, two of the main angels, the angelic host. And again, this is, I love these midrashim because they're all filled with angels, but you can see they're working together. And here finally, again, at the end of the argument is you killed people. And you didn't just kill people in the Nile when you drown the babies, but you are actually using, as we saw in the Midrash, not in the Torah, but it's in the Midrash, that the Egyptians were using Hebrew babies as mortar when the Israelites couldn't fulfill their quota of mortar with their own hay, their own materials. They had to use their own children as mortar. And so they come there with the brick, with the baby in the, bones are in the brick, and that's it. And that's the final straw. That's where God says, I'm not going to hear anymore. I can't. There's no mercy for these people. They're going to be destroyed. And again, it's very reminiscent of the Holocaust too, where, it's like, at what point do people say, you know what? Germany's going to be wholly destroyed. All the stuff that they're going to have to suffer with, they're going to have to suffer with it. There's not going to be, any more mercy shown. They're going to have to suffer. And it is this idea that God is concerned with every creature, every human being, every person is holy and has an innate holiness. So how can God destroy some of his creatures? Again, the argument is you've saved the Israelites. The Israelites are saved. They can cross the Sea of Reeds. You can shut the sea and they're free. Nothing. They can't come this is the logic of the rabbis looking at the sea instance and saying, but it didn't have to have, the Egyptians didn't have to die. So it was actually a Jewish question. It was Jews asking the question, did the Egyptians have to die in this? Couldn't God have spared the Egyptians? Shouldn't God have spared the Egyptians? And so this is where the Midrash essentially asks or answers this really important question. It asks and then answers the question of, okay, God could have spared the Egyptians. And not only did he not spare the Egyptians, his destruction of the Egyptians is so overwhelming and so miraculous that is almost as miraculous as them coming out. That's what the Midrash says. So it does, ask that essential question, which couldn't God have spared the Egyptians? So that's what we get left with, which is no, they had to be punished. God's going to have to deal with, we're going to have to deal with the consequence of bad nations and bad actors being punished collectively. And it doesn't stop. I mean, it doesn't end. It happens in every war and every loss of life on a military level there's always what they call collateral damage. And again, the argument here is that the Egyptians have already suffered. They already have dealt with this. But now, of course, it's not just the Egyptians, in particular, it's the Egyptian army that's going to be destroyed. So here's what happens to the Egyptian army, the description in the Midrash of what happens here. So the angels, their protectors have already been destroyed, according to this. They're done because they have no protection. Here we go.
At the moment when the last of the Israelites stepped out of the bed of the sea, the first of the Egyptians set foot into it. But in the same instant, the waters surged back into their wonted place, and all the Egyptians perished. But drowning was not the only punishment decreed upon them by God. He undertook a thoroughgoing campaign against them. When Pharaoh was preparing to persecute the Israelites, he asked his army which of the saddle beasts was the swiftest runner, the one he would use, and they said, "There is none swifter than your piebald mare, whose like is to be found nowhere in the world." Accordingly, Pharaoh mounted the mare and pursued after the Israelites seaward. And while Pharaoh was inquiring of his army as to the swiftest animal to mount, God was questioning the angels as to the swiftest creature to use to the detriment of Pharaoh. And the angels answered, "O Lord of the world, all things are thine, and all are your handiwork. You know well, and it is manifest before you, that among all creatures there is none so quick as the wind that comes from under the throne of your glory." And the Lord flew swiftly upon the wings of the wind.
Okay. So what's going on here? I mean, what is going on in this Midrash? Because in this Midrash, it's Pharaoh and God going face to face, which of course doesn't seem like a very fair fight. But remember, Pharaoh thinks he's a god. Pharaoh thinks he can do anything. And so Pharaoh is preparing to go into battle. He's taking his best horse. And God, likewise, is ready to go. Now, what's interesting, of course, is that this is all based on the Torah. The Song of the Sea, Exodus chapter 15, paints a very anthropomorphic view of God. As a matter of fact, the very famous line in that is Adonai ish melchama. God is a man of war. That's what the line in the Torah says. So the Torah has God pictured as fighting in battle, and again using the wind as, like a chariot, like something that he's going into battle with. It's a very interesting part of the Torah. Again, as we talked about, I think before, and we definitely talked about on Wednesday night, a few weeks ago, Many people consider it to be the oldest or one of the oldest sections of the Torah, going back to the 12th to 9th centuries, depending on how early people are dating stuff. But like almost universally, however old things are in the Torah, that section's one of the oldest. And so people have looked at the Song of the Sea and said, wow, that's pretty unusual. It's poetry, it's song, obviously, that's unusual. But it's also very, very anthropomorphic. The picture of God in this is one of God really going into battle. It's really one of like a song of a victor, of a general or a king going into battle. That's what the line is. And again, there are people who say it's not even that. There's a certain level of theology there, which seems to indicate that there are other gods. It's just God is bigger than every other God, which again could display a development of theology amongst the Israelites, which is that other gods may exist. It's just there's no God like our God. Our God is the biggest God, is the most powerful God, is the God of gods. And that's why that line that we know the best out of this Song of the Sea is Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, Mi chamocha ne'edar ba'kodesh. But the line literally means Mi chamocha, who is like, who can be compared to God, to Adonai, to the Lord. Ba'elim Adonai, amongst the angel or amongst the deities, amongst the things that are powerful. The Elim is another word for gods. So literally it could be translated as who is like God amongst the gods, which is why the rabbis aren't going to go down that road, but they will say maybe the Elim are like the angels. Maybe the Elim are like other powers, other nations, that nothing is like God. And so that's why in the Midrash you have these wonderful battle scenes enhanced, but also maybe again described to allow for the Elim to not be other gods. But yeah, the Song of the Sea is very, very interesting. And it's, if you take it out of context and you just read it by itself, are these people 100% monotheistic, or are they 100%, are they where they are later on, or where we are when it comes to our vision of God? Definitely have God fighting. That's without a question. And the Midrash has God fighting. So God fights Pharaoh, but of course God isn't fighting. Well, God isn't there alone. Let's put it that way.
The angels now advanced to support the Lord in his war against the Egyptians. Some brought swords, some arrows, and some spears. But God warded them off, saying, "Away, I need no help." The arrows sped by Pharaoh against the children of Israel were answered by the Lord with fiery darts directed against the Egyptians. Pharaoh's army advanced with gleaming swords, and the Lord sent out lightnings that discomfited the Egyptians. Pharaoh hurled missiles, and the Lord discharged hailstones and coals of fire against him. With trumpets, sackbuts, and horns, the Egyptians made their assault, and the Lord thundered in the heavens, and the Most High uttered his voice. In vain the Egyptians marched forward in orderly battle array. The Lord deprived them of their standards, and they were thrown into wild confusion. To lure them into the water, the Lord caused fiery steeds to swim out upon the sea, and the horses of the Egyptians followed them, each with a rider upon his back.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild scene. God just told the angels to back off. I'll take care of them all myself. I don't need your help. I'm doing this myself, which is again, God as Ishmael Haman, God as a warrior. What does it mean? That God didn't need the angels who normally would maybe fight for and do those kind of things. God doesn't normally get involved in this kind of stuff. But the Torah says that God did in this situation. And God matches whatever the Egyptians throw at us, God matches back. And this is not going well for the Egyptians because they're going against God.
Now the Egyptians tried to flee to their land in their chariots drawn by she-mules. What's a she-mule? As they had treated the children of Israel.
By the way, notice what actually happens here, which is the she-mules seem to be more powerful, or at least they're not. She-mules are now the retreating. They're seen as the way to get your stuff out when you're trying to survive. They're not going into battle anymore. They're retreating. So this is now, we're going to try to survive.
But there's no such thing as a
As
she-mule.
I know. However they describe this, mules, these are animals that are stronger.
Unnatural animals.
Yeah, they're stronger than normal animal, and nothing's working.
As they had treated the children of Israel in a way contrary to nature, so the Lord treated them now. Not the she-mules pulled the chariots, but the chariots, though late fire from heaven had consumed their wheels, dragged the men and the beasts into the water. The chariots were laden with silver, gold, and all sorts of costly things, which the river Pishon, as it flows forth from paradise, carries down into the Gihon. Thence the treasures float into the Red Sea, and by its waters they were tossed into the chariots of the Egyptians. It was the wish of Israel, and for this reason he caused the chariots to roll down into the sea, and the sea in turn cast them out upon the opposite shore at the feet of the Israelites.
Wow, so they got even more treasure. They got chariots filled with treasures. Wow, this is kind of crazy. It's even more miraculous than you thought it was.
And the Lord fought against the Egyptians also with a pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire. The former made the soil miry, and the mire was heated to the boiling point by the latter, so that the hoofs of the horses dropped from their feet, and they could not budge from the spot.
You can keep going. Yep.
The anguish and the torture that God brought upon the Egyptians at the Red Sea caused them by far more excruciating pain than the plagues they had endured in Egypt. For at the sea he delivered them into the hands of the angels of destruction, who tormented them pitilessly. Had God not endowed the Egyptians with a double portion of strength, they could not have stood the pain a single moment.
Yeah, so it's much worse than you thought. They don't just get hit by the sea, they get hit by plagues, they get hit by pain, they get hit by suffering, illness, just torturous, horrible pain while they're there. And it gets worse because God actually causes them to be able to survive it. And so he gives them extra strength so that they can deal with these horrible plagues. So they get it more. I mean, it's really, really bad. As bad as you think it is, it's even worse. So this is the chaos and horrible situation is just like you can't even imagine it. Why is it so bad?
The last judgment executed upon the Egyptians corresponded to the wicked designs harbored against Israel by the three different parties among them when they set out in pursuit of their liberated slaves. The first party had said, "We will bring Israel back to Egypt." The second had said, "We will strip them bare." And the third had said, "We will slay them all." The Lord blew upon the first with his breath, and the sea covered them. The second party he shook into the sea, and the third he pitched into the depths of the abyss. He tossed them about as lentils are shaken up and down in a saucepan. The upper ones are made to fall to the bottom, the lower ones fly to the top. This was the experience of the Egyptians, and worse still. First the rider and his beast were whisked high up in the air, and then the two together The riders sitting upon the back of the beast were hurled to the bottom of the sea.
Yeah, it sounds like a horrible ride at Magic Mountain. And it is, yes, because it says that he hurled them. And so, the Torah says that God hurled them, hurled the horse and rider. Well, this is now allowed for the imagination of what that actually looked like, which is they get shaken around, they get thrown through space. And it's just, again, not just that the waters came over them, but they got thrown up in the sky and then got thrown down to the bottom of the sea. Both. They hit both extremes in their complete utter destruction. And again, it's because they asked for it. They chased Israel and wanted to take us back even after the plagues, even after they let us go, even after they think that we're going to be okay. So they didn't give up. And it says that they actually wanted to kill us still. They weren't just going to put us back into slavery. They're actually going to kill us. So
the Egyptians endeavored to save themselves from the sea by conjuring charms, for they were great magicians. Of the 10 measures of magic allotted to the world, they had taken 9 for themselves. And indeed, they succeeded for the moment. They escaped out of the sea. But immediately the sea said to itself, "How could I allow the pledge entrusted to me by God to be taken from me?" And the water rushed after the Egyptians and dragged back every man of them.
Yeah, so the Egyptians almost got out because they're really, really powerful. Like, they are 90% of the magical powers in the world, they have them. Which, by the way, if you looked at Egypt in the ancient world, wouldn't be hard to say that based on the pyramids and the things that they had created, which even by our today's standards are just amazing. It's hard not to believe that the Egyptians had some kind of conjuring powers. Midrash says they did. The Midrash says, okay, they did. They really were that powerful. But they're not more powerful than God. And when God told the seas, essentially, you got to do your job, destroy these people, the seas took it seriously and said, this is my job. I'm not going to let them get away. I can't. God put me in charge of drowning them. I'm going to do it. So he doesn't let them get away. But wait, there are some very special people who get punished here.
Among the Egyptians were the 2 arch-magicians, Janus and Jambres. They made wings for themselves with which they flew up to heaven. They also said to Pharaoh, "If God himself has done this thing, we can effect nothing. But if this work has been put into the hands of his angel, then we will shake his lieutenants into the sea." They proceeded at once to use their magic contrivances, whereby they dragged the angels down. These cried up to God, "Save us, O God, for the waters are come into our soul. Speak your word that will cause the magicians to drown in the mighty waters." And Gabriel cried to God, "By the greatness of your glory, dash your adversaries to pieces." Hereupon, God bade Michael go and execute judgment upon the 2 magicians. The archangels seized hold of Janus and Jambres by the locks of their hair, and he shattered them against the surface of the water.
Wow. This is some angelic battle stuff. As we mentioned, Janus and Jambres, according to tradition, were Balaam's sons, who are the magicians who are working for the Egyptians, who are essentially the head magicians. They're the ones who go against Moses. They're not mentioned in the Torah. They are mentioned frequently in the Midrash. There's entire texts about these 2 guys who are bad. They're bad magicians, but they're powerful magicians. And their powers as villains, like any great superhero story, is only going to work if they're really powerful. And they are. I mean, they create wings that fly up into heaven, and they actually are successful at capturing some of the angels. Which also, by the way, kind of tells us that if you're powerful enough In your sorcery, you can defeat angels. You can actually take control of angels, which is kind of scary. And it basically tells us that if God isn't paying attention, if God isn't involved, these kinds of things can happen. I mean, that's the consequence of what you just read. That why do sorcerers sometimes why are they able to do their thing? Because of this. Because sometimes God entrusts power to the angels, and the angels can be defeated. That's the consequence of that. So, interestingly, these figures of Janus and Jambres are very important in the Midrash, or really in the Apocrypha, in the non-Jewish texts of the time. They're very important. And as I mentioned, they're actually mentioned by name by the Christian Bible. So the Christian Bible, one place, mentions them as bad people and as wizards, sorcerers. And so, at least by the time of the Christian Bible and the time of the Midrash, these guys are well known. They are called out by name. They are very powerful. They are evil. They are destroyed in different places or different ways. And in this one, Michael is the one who does it. And Michael is by us, by our, I mean, the Jewish people's avenging angel. He is our protector. Michael is the one that is going into battle for us. And so Michael is considered, again, we know this by the book of Daniel, Michael is actually named as an angel in the book of Daniel and becomes the angel who is essentially God's go-to angel to protect his people. He becomes important later on in Christian tradition as well, because essentially he becomes the protector of all God's kings and God's warriors, which is why Michael oftentimes figures into mythology and in the imagery of other non-Jewish countries like England and some of the other places where you'll see statues or images of Michael, paintings of Michael battling dragons and evil. That Michael becomes the angel, protecting angel, warrior angel, and it exists from a very early time in the Midrash. And actually, as I said, in the Torah, in the Bible itself, in the book of Daniel, which is one of the latest, if not the latest book, probably the latest book in the Bible. By that time, Michael is making very prominent appearances as our protector angel. So here he is destroying Janus and Jambres. They are destroyed. The bad guys are finally defeated as well. Doesn't say again that sorcerers were destroyed in the battle or at the Sea of Reeds, but here they get their comeuppance as well. Janus and Jambres are not mentioned. They're not called Janus and Jambres in the Prince of Egypt, but they are the angel. They are the sorcerers, the wizards, played by Steve Martin and Martin Short in the Prince of Egypt, voiced and sung as bad guys going against the Jewish people, going against Moses and that. So the bad guys are gone. Those bad guys. There's still one really big bad guy that we're going to read about now. So what we're going to finish right now with this part of the Red Sea is what happens to Pharaoh, because the Torah isn't really clear about what happens to Pharaoh. And if you think that I'm overstating that case, it's not really clear what happens to Pharaoh. It says Pharaoh and his chariots are going to be destroyed. We're not really sure whether Pharaoh himself is destroyed, whether he actually was killed. You'd think he was, but it doesn't say it, which leads us to these wonderful midrashim about what happens to Pharaoh. We know what happens to his horse and riders, his chariots. We know what happens to them. Very clearly, very explicitly said. Not Pharaoh. So let's read what might have happened to Pharaoh.
Thus, all the Egyptians were drowned. Only one was spared, Pharaoh himself. When the children of Israel raised their voices to sing a song of praise to God at the shores of the Red Sea, Pharaoh heard it as he was jostled hither and thither by the billows, And he pointed his finger heavenward and cried out, I believe in you, O God. You are righteous, and I and my people are wicked. And I acknowledge now that there is no God in the world besides you. Without a moment's delay, Gabriel descended and laid an iron chain around Pharaoh's neck, and holding him securely, he addressed him thus, Villain, yesterday you said, who is the Lord that I should hearken to his voice? And now you say the Lord is righteous. With that, he let him drop into the depths of the sea, and there he tortured him for 50 days to make the power of God known to him. At the end of the time, he installed him as king of the great city of Nineveh. And after the lapse of many centuries, when Jonah came to Nineveh and prophesied the overthrow of the city on account of the evil done by the people, it was Pharaoh who, seized by fear and terror, covered himself with sackcloth and sat in ashes, and with his own mouth made proclamation and published this decree through Nineveh: let neither man nor beast, herd nor flock taste anything. Let them not feed nor drink water, for I know there is no God besides him in all the world. All his words are truth, and all his judgments are true and faithful.
So did everybody just catch that Midrash?
I never heard that one.
It's a wild one, right, folks?
Yeah.
Pharaoh is none other than the unnamed king of Nineveh during the story of Jonah. I mean, hundreds of years separated. The Midrash knows that. It says so. He gets to live hundreds of years as the king of Nineveh, the Assyrians. Now, what's this even based on? Like, why do we even have this Midrash? Like, why do we need this Midrash? Anybody want to venture a guess for why we even need this Midrash?
Well, the rabbis don't like to leave anything unnamed.
That's true. They don't like, and they don't like the fact that the king of Nineveh seems to, as a Gentile king, seems to like right away go, oh yeah, if God's telling us we repent, we got to repent. You got to listen to God. Like, why is he so quick? And they said, because he's had experience. He knows. And what's so amazing about this Midrash is that God actually gives him a chance to repent. It's very easy to say, oh, you're God. You're God. I made a mistake. I'm so messed up. Now he's actually given a chance to show it. He's actually given a chance to repent. And so here we have this interesting Midrash that ties again these questions of, well, what happened to Pharaoh? Why is this king not mentioned? And again, he's a king, so he fit really well into that role of being a king because he's been the king of Egypt. So he could be the king of Assyria, in that he knows how to be a king. So there's that. But all of this kind of, again, allows for this big question of why does the king relent so fast? Well, he knows. Now, that's bizarre. That's a bizarre Midrash, in that, again, not what you would have expected to happen to Pharaoh. But there's more, because, again, so he gets punished, but he also has a chance to repent. But that's not the only possibility of what happens to Pharaoh. Here's Pharaoh again.
Pharaoh never died and never will die. He always stands at the portal of hell. And when the kings of the nations enter, he makes the power of God known to them at once in these words: "Oh, you fools, why have you not learned knowledge from me? I am denied the Lord God, and he brought 10 plagues upon me, sent me to the bottom of the sea, kept me there for 50 days, released me then and brought me up. Thus I could not but believe in him."
Which seems kind of weird. So Pharaoh's job is also to be a cautionary tale for every king that comes to hell. And the first person that is at the entrance to hell for them is the preeminent king who didn't know better, which is Pharaoh. And so Pharaoh welcomes them and says, let me tell you the story of what I did. Welcome to hell. And so there's Pharaoh in hell forever, greeting people who deserve it. people of power, people who should have known better and had the power to do good things, to treat the Jewish people better. It's an interesting idea that the people who wrote this story obviously were projecting into their own day, to the Roman rulers and rulers of the, the new Christian kingdoms that were persecuting Jews, and saying, oh yeah, they'll be meeting Pharaoh one day. Those kings, those Roman, those Caesars, those those leaders of the Byzantine Empire or whoever, they'll be meeting Pharaoh one day. Those guys have, they'll have somebody telling them where it's at when they get to hell. Wow, that's an interesting and provocative thought, that Pharaoh is there to greet those kings when they come to hell. There you go.
God caused the Egyptians to be washed ashore in a death struggle. There were 4 reasons for this. The Israelites were not to say that as they themselves had escaped, so also the Egyptians had passed through the sea dry shod, only the latter had gone in another direction and therefore vanished from sight. The Egyptians, on the other hand, were not to think that the children of Israel had been drowned in the sea like themselves. In the third place, the Israelites were to have as their booty the silver, gold, and other precious things with which the Egyptians were decked. And finally, the Israelites were to enjoy the satisfaction of seeing their enemies suffer. With their finger, they could point them out one by one, saying, "This one was my taskmaster who beat me with those fists of his at which the dogs are now gnawing. And yonder Egyptian, the dogs are chewing the feet with which he kicked me."
Wow. And that's a really, really powerful scene, because the Israelites actually get to see the Egyptians who tortured them and who enslaved them. And so there's a certain justice here too, in that, I mean, again, the assumption is that these armies were the ones who were the most vicious. And it's not always the case, but oftentimes it's the case that, I guess you could say the soldiers are the ones being punished because they're the ones who were causing the most destruction. And they didn't just cause destruction as soldiers, but also as taskmasters. So obviously, where does the mind go when you read this? You think about, Nazi officers being held accountable, and for their prisoners to actually see them being executed and being punished with their own eyes, to actually know that the people who are responsible for the actual individuals, not as a theoretical or embodiment of a collective group, but the actual individuals that are responsible for were responsible for your pain and suffering, to actually see those people be punished. So there's an interesting idea here, which is one that I think is very real, which is that this wasn't just, oh, Egyptians got destroyed. No, these guys that got destroyed, the Israelites had a chance to see them. They had a chance to see their bodies. Okay, well, that's pretty powerful. It's not done.
As they lay on the shore in their last agony, they had to witness their own destruction and the victory of the Israelites. And they also beheld the suffering of their brethren that had remained behind in Egypt. For God poured out his punishment over the whole people, whether in Egypt or at the Red Sea. As for the corpses by the shores of the sea, they did not remain unburied. The earth swallowed them by way of reward for Pharaoh's having acknowledged the justice of the chastisement that had been inflicted upon king and people. Before their corpses had been disposed of in this way, there had been a quarrel between the earth and the sea. The sea said to the earth, "Take your children to yourself," and the earth retorted, "Keep those whom you have slain." The sea hesitated to do as the earth bade, for fear that God would demand them back on the day of judgment. And the earth hesitated because it remembered with terror the curse that had been pronounced upon it for having sucked up Abel's blood. Only after God swore an oath not to punish it for receiving the corpses of the Egyptians would the earth swallow them.
Wow. So that's an interesting question of, like, where would the bodies have gone? We would have thought they would have gone in the water. They were drowned. But no, they were washed up on the shore. So were they buried? Well, the Midrash posits that they were not buried, but they did go into the earth. The earth swallowed them up, and kind of miraculously, their bodies were not left out. But it wasn't easy because the earth didn't want to take their bodies. The earth didn't want to be responsible for essentially providing a home for these bodies. And God says, no, you're okay. It'll be okay. Just do it, and you don't have to worry about it. So it's this interesting idea of, like, who wants these bodies? Where does this body go? It is an interesting question, because as weird as this sounds to us, as weird as where do you bury something like this? It's not an impractical or irrelevant question, or ancient question, if you will, right? Because we've had this discussion on a national level, or at least on a kind of a philosophical level. What do you do with the bodies, the remains of a truly evil person, a person responsible for evil? Because are they entitled to a normal burial? Are they entitled to a place where people can come and visit and pay honor to them, and those kind of things? And again, I'm thinking of, one of the most famous recent cases, one could argue, was Osama Bin Laden. How are you going to dispose of this body in a way that, again, to some extent, doesn't allow him to be given proper rights, or rights that would allow him to be buried in a place that people would be able to find? And of course, Israel dealt with this with Eichmann. They executed Eichmann. It's the only person that Israel ever executed as a prisoner. Israel doesn't have capital punishment. Doesn't mean Israel hasn't killed people before. They just seem to have killed the director of Iran's nuclear program just a few months ago. But as far as, we would consider them extrajudicial killings. Eichmann was executed, was convicted and ordered executed, and then he was cremated, and his remains were put out in the water, in the ocean, because Israel didn't want to bury him, and Germany didn't want to bury him, and nobody wanted his remains. And there was this issue of, again, how do you bury people where do they go? And so this is not a dead issue, to use that horrible pun. It's not a dead issue. It's an issue that still exists, which is, how do you bury someone who really, to some extent, doesn't deserve a place on this earth, forfeited their right to have a place on this earth? It's a weird question, and it's one that that we dealt with, that the Israelites are going to deal with now with the Egyptians. And again, Pharaoh, what happens to Pharaoh in particular, pretty wild. So Pharaoh might still be alive in hell, but the Egyptians are buried, and kind of miraculously, if you will, too. All right. That's not the end, because now we have what the Israelites do after they're saved. So this is, of course, the Midrash on what it meant for us. This is pretty wild. Let's read this.
Mighty is faith, for the Spirit of God came upon the Israelites as a reward for their trust in God and in his servant Moses. And it was in this exaltation that they sang to God, to the Lord, a song that moved him to grant forgiveness for all their sins. This song was the second of the 9 songs that in the course of history Israel sang to their God. They assembled to sing the first in Egypt on the night when they were freed from captivity. Their second was the Song of Triumph by the Red Sea. Their third, when the well sprang up in the wilderness. Moses sang the fourth before his death. The fifth was Joshua's song after his victory over the 5 Amorite kings. Deborah and Barak sang the sixth when they conquered Sisera. The seventh was David's psalm of thanksgiving to God for his deliverance out of the hand of all his enemies. The eighth was Solomon's song at the dedication of the temple. The ninth, Jehoshaphat sang as, trusting in God, he went to battle against the Moabites and the Ammonites. The 10th and last song, however, will be that grand and mighty song when Israel will raise their voice in triumph at their future deliverance. For that will be the final release of Israel for all time.
So that is the song in its place in the greatest hits of the Jewish people. It's not the first, at least chronologically. It is the second. So the first song is the song we sang just a couple of days before when we were about to leave Egypt. The song that we sang then. And there are other songs that it says are sung in the Bible. The most famous, of course, really the second most famous is being the Song of Deborah, the song that we have in the book of Judges, which is actually the Haftarah for this Torah portion. So the rabbis, knowing how important the Song of the Sea is, also have a song matched up with it that week, this week that we had a few weeks ago, to also look at the Song of Deborah from chapter 5 of Judges, where we have this great song that the Jewish people sing when they're rescued from the Canaanites, from Sisera, the Canaanite general. So both songs, by the way, you can make the argument. Song of the Sea is also sometimes called the Song of Miriam, sometimes the Song of Moses. But if it's a Song of Miriam, it's both, as we talked about, women leading up in song and songs that are ascribed to women. Both of those sections are very, very important from the standpoint of, again, preservation of Israelite texts. Very, as I've said before, there's a theory that these are the oldest texts, and the Song of Deborah is also one of those really, really old texts that is reflective of one of the earliest stages of Israelite writing, in the sense that maybe, again, by the language, maybe even by some of the things that are described in the song, that the songs are actually earlier, or the earliest parts of the Bible, the earliest texts that we have. But we also have other songs, like the song that Moses sings to the people at the very end of his life, at the very end of the book of Deuteronomy, at the end of the Torah, where we have Moses singing to the people and giving them this final song in Ha'azinu, and singing them essentially his goodbyes. Again, songs that David sang. Well, David sang lots of songs, but the song that he sang, one of the psalms that he had sung, again, Psalm 136 is there's a lot of songs of deliverance that one could point to and say this is one of the great songs of the Jewish people. But look, it's only one of the songs that historically we sang. What's so amazing, though, is that the best song is yet to come. And that's what's so amazing about this little text here. This Midrash tells us that there is a song that will be sung when we're finally redeemed, the final redemption, the Messianic era. And that song will be the greatest song of all. This song was great. The Song of the Sea was wonderful. The songs of David are wonderful. The Song of Deborah is wonderful, but nothing like the final song, the song of redemption, the ultimate redemption. That song is yet to be sung. So that's the 10th and final song. And of course, some of the songs kind of a little bit harder to find in the Bible, but like the Song of Jehoshaphat, but it's there. And, you can make the argument. There's lots of songs in the Bible. The whole book of Psalms is songs. But there are songs that are going to be sung that, again, nothing be like the final song, the song for the final redemption. So this is, we're going to get to a very famous Midrash here.
When Israel prepared to sound their praises to God for delivering them from destruction in the Red Sea, God, to show his recognition of Israel's fulfillment of the token of the Abrahamic covenant, bade the angels who came to intone their song, "Wait, let my children sing first," he said. This incident with the angels is like the story of the king who, upon returning from a victorious campaign, was told that his son and his servant were waiting with wreaths in their hands and were asking who should first crown him. The king said, "Oh, you fools, to question if my servant should walk before my son? No, let my son come first."
So God tells the angels, I know you want to sing, but my children are going to sing first. So this again kind of elevates us even above the angels, that we're allowed to sing first, even before the angels get to sing.
Who are probably better singers than us.
Probably. And that's all they do. I mean, some of these angels, that's all they do is sing in front of God. And God says, no, I'm going to listen to them. And again, this is really this kind of this image of it's time to sing. It's time to sing. But wait, who gets to sing first? Whose song comes first? Our song comes first. And again, you can make the argument you saved the better song for last, but that's not what they're saying. This is about the way songs go when a king comes home from battle. And this is God's battle. And who's going to sing first? The Israelites are going to sing. So here's a reminder of what we read a couple weeks ago.
This was the second time the angels were obliged to retire before Israel. When Israel stood by the Red Sea, before them the rolling waters, but behind them the hosts of Egypt, then too the angels appeared to sing their daily song of praise to the Lord. But God called to them, "Forbear, my children are in distress, and you would sing."
So there was a time when the angels, that's what they do, they sing every day. There was a time that they didn't sing, which was yesterday. When they were at the Sea of Reeds and not knowing what they're going to do, the angels came up and they were going to start singing. And God said, "No, you can't sing now. Look at them. They're going crazy. You can't sing. It's not the time to sing." So the angels do what they want to do. They want to sing. That's what they're there. That's what they're created to do. No, they didn't get to sing before. So this is not the first time the angels didn't get to do their songs the way they normally do. So it gets better. Let's put it that way.
But even after the men had completed their song, it was not yet given to the angels to raise their voices. For after the men followed the women of Israel, and only then came the turn of the angels. Then they began to murmur and said, "Is it not enough that the men have preceded us? Shall the women come before us also?" But God replied, "As surely as you live, so it is."
So that's a fairly sexist little text there, which is that the angels are not happy. They can understand the men singing first, but not the women. Women get to sing before us. And the answer, whether you, again, like the way the Midrash presents it or not, is that, yeah, when it comes to angels, women are ahead of angels when it comes to praising God, because they're God's creations in a way that the angels are not. And this is something that if we were going to continue to play out that Midrash, I don't know the angels are so happy about hearing that. They don't seem so happy. They wouldn't seem happy. They're not happy. So are they happy after God tells them? Well, you could say they learned their lesson, but maybe they don't. So this idea that angels are not real happy with us is an interesting idea, which again is picked up in other parts of Midrash, it's other parts of literature and places where we see it, that theme exist, including, Milton and other speculation on how did the human beings, the introduction of human beings, how did that go over with the angels? Because it seems as though it's not always, hey, it's great to have these, in the words of Christopher Walken, these meat puppets walking around the earth thinking that they're better than us. We're timeless, immortal creatures, and these guys are walking around thinking that they're better than us. So it could be that the angels don't let that go, which again kind of calls into question, like, are the angels really happy with us? Maybe again, maybe the reason that angels are so eager to punish us when they're called on to punish us is because they don't really like us that much. They're not really cool with us, in the sense that we're a distraction, we're not God's best creations, and that God seems to defer to us when God shouldn't be deferring to us. These are all possibilities that exist, that this hierarchy that angels want to be in, God makes it hard on them, if you will, by having us. So there is that, they're the firstborn, if you will. The angels are there before we are, and they don't have free will. And that's kind of where it gets a little hard, because do they have free will? Aren't they just doing what God wants? These are kind of the questions that kind of get borne out by the speculation about what angels do when they're frustrated, if you will. Or again, when they're given the option to do God's work against us. So when God tells the angels, go down and punish these people, they're going, when can I start? I'm ready to go, God. Whenever you want me to start doing some punishing, some smiting, we're ready to go, God. That's part of it, maybe. All right, so the song. Let's get, again, we haven't gotten to the part, most of you know this part coming up.
At first, Israel requested their leader Moses to begin the song, but he declined, saying, "No, you shall begin it, for it is a greater mark of honor to be praised by the multitude than by a single one." At once the people sang, "We will glorify the Eternal, for he has shown us signs and tokens. When the Egyptians passed the decree against us and said, 'Every son that is born you shall cast into the river,' our mothers went into the field, and you did bid a sleep to fall upon them. And they bore us without any pain. And the angels descended from heaven, washed and anointed us, and robed us in many colored silken garments, and placed in our hands 2 lumps, one of butter and one of honey. When our mothers awoke and saw us washed, anointed, and clothed in silk, then they praised you and said, 'Praised be God, who has not turned his grace and his lasting love from the seed of our father Abraham. And now, behold, they are in your hand. Do with them as you will.' And they departed. When the Egyptians saw us, they approached us to kill us. But you, in your great mercy, did bid the earth swallow us and set us in another place, where we were not seen by the Egyptians. And lo, in this way did you save us from their hand. When we grew up, we wandered in troops to Egypt, where each recognized his parents and his family. All this you have done for us, therefore we will sing of you."
Okay, and if you read the next paragraph.
Thereupon Moses said, "You have given thanks to the Holy One, blessed be he, and not I will praise his name, for to me also, and now I will praise his name, for to me also he has shown signs and tokens. The Lord is my strength and my song, and he has become my salvation. He is my God, and I will prepare him a habitation, my father's God, and I will exalt him."
So this is, again, this question of who's actually going to lead the people in song. And it seems like Moses and the people of Israel sang the song, but like, who's going to sing first? So this is kind of the discussion that goes on here. Who's going to sing first? And so what's interesting about this is that there's this midrash that the Israelites didn't really drown in the Nile, which is weird because it seems that they did, but no, they actually got saved, and it was the angels who helped us and took care of us when we would have been otherwise drowned, which kind of explains one of the reasons why maybe the Egyptians in some versions of the Midrash don't get punished for that, because even though they tried to kill us, they didn't really kill us. It's at least in one version of the Midrash that they were not successful in drowning us. We know that they're not successful in drowning Moses, but the fact that they really aren't successful in drowning any of these Israelite babies is kind of weird to think, but it kind of goes against this idea that God wouldn't have done.
Maybe
something
that's
for us there.
why the Midrash, although they don't seem to be that concerned with being consistent, but maybe that's why they didn't mention drowning the babies when they were talking about all the awful things the Egyptians did. You can't have it
There
both
is that-
ways.
Exactly. There is that strain of midrash that has that as being the issue, which is that Pharaoh was never really successful at destroying the Israelite babies, which is weird because the whole purpose of telling us how bad the Egyptians were was because they enacted these really cruel things. But quite frankly, it kind of called into question, how did God allow that to happen? And to some extent, the rabbis didn't want to go there. Now, again, you can make the argument, well, they suffered. I mean, why wouldn't their ancestors suffer too? Well, there's this kind of understanding here, which is that the Israelites, at least by the time of, only again, in the time of Egypt, they don't really deserve to be punished yet, which is kind of weird because you're like, well, who deserves babies to be killed? Well, the issue is this: if the Israelites aren't really knowledgeable yet about the mitzvot and what they're responsible for, can God really punish them for it yet? And so there's this weird idea that you have, and again, it's not all of them, because we heard that not only did the babies drown in the Nile, but they were turned into mortar. So you have like really, really go beyond how much they could suffer. And then you also have this tendency that, no, God didn't let them die because God couldn't let them die because they can't be held accountable yet because they don't have the Torah yet. So you can punish Jews later. You can punish us because we know better. But these people didn't really know any better. So that's one of the reasons why we even have Midrashim that would say that God didn't let these Israelite babies die in Egypt. How could you even have those? Well, because of that. So it's this kind of weird idea that, well, it seems like there are a lot of Israelites. So if Pharaoh was killing them, how did there get to still be so many? So that's where that even comes from. It also comes from this idea of you can't punish people yet, if you will. But it's all kind of based on this initial question of, where are all these Israelites still alive if Pharaoh's killing them all? Anyways, these are all, possibilities, if you will, of why this happens the way it happens. So Moses to sing. But again, whose song is it really? Is it Moses and all Israel? Here we go.
Out of focus.
Yeah.
The song by the Red Sea was as much the song of Moses as of all Israel, for the great leader counted as not less than all the other Israelites together. And besides, he had composed a large portion of the song. In virtue of the Spirit of God that possessed them while they sang, Moses and the people mutually supplemented each other, so that as soon as Moses spoke half the verse, the people repeated it, and linked the second complementary part to it. So Moses began with the half verse, I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously, whereupon the people answered, the horse and his rider has he thrown into the sea. And in this wise developed the whole song.
Yeah, and so the rabbis are pointing out something that they notice here about biblical poetry, which is that they're all doublets. They're all the same phrase repeated with synonyms in one half, and then it's repeated again in the next one. And then so each line is an idea sung two different ways. That's biblical poetry. That's biblical poetry everywhere there's biblical poetry or biblical song. But the rabbis did something really interesting here, which is they say it's actually based on the fact that Moses and Israel are both singing, and they're singing, and their ideas supplement each other beautifully. So Moses says something, and the Israelites say the other. And so the reason that we have this style is because they're both singing, and they're both kind of, balancing each other out, if you will, with ideas. So again, horse and rider thrown in the sea is exactly like, again, he's triumphed glorious. There's even better examples of it. That just happens to be the beginning of it. But everything in biblical poetry is that way. That's just the way biblical poetry is. It's the style. It's not easy, by the way. It's not easy to do, and it's you need to really have a thesaurus next to you if you're writing this kind. They didn't have thesauruses, but they had really, really good poets who can pull this off. But again, we have it wherever we have songs or poetry or that style, even in biblical prophecy, which is usually done in that poetic style. We have that style. Ma tovu ahalecha Yaakov mishkanotecha Yisrael. How beautiful are your tents, Jacob, your dwelling place is Israel. That is a perfect example of biblical poetry. So here it's that Moses and Israel and the Israelites are singing back and forth. So kind of cool.
But not alone the adults took part in this song. Even the sucklings dropped their mother's breasts to join in singing. Yea, even the embryos in the womb joined the melody, and the angels' voices swelled the song. God so distinguished Israel during the passage through the Red Sea that even the children beheld his glory. Yes, even the woman slave saw more of the presence of God by the Red Sea than the prophet Ezekiel was ever permitted to behold.
Okay, well, let's stop right there for a quick second to explain what happens there, which is that every Israelite had to sing. They had to, because this was such a crazy miracle, and it was such a unique moment in history that everybody took part in a miracle. Everybody is there part of that miracle, including a fetus. Well, that's pretty wild, but it's an amazing song. Now, I will say that as beautiful as this idea is, there's also kind of a sad idea here, which is that in the hierarchy of people in ancient Israel, at the very bottom, it just says are women slaves. You have men, women, male slaves, and then women slaves. So not a great thing to be reminded of. The fact that as the Israelites are leaving Egypt, they already have slaves. They definitely seem to have slaves by the time they get to the Mount Sinai, to get the Ten Commandments a few weeks later. I mean, you can make the argument that those laws are for the future, but not according to the Midrash, not according to like a literal reading of the Torah. It doesn't say you're slaves that you will have. So did the Israelites actually leave Egypt with slaves? It's a possibility. Did slaves have slaves? Well, they did. We don't like to talk about it because it's so horrible to think about the system of slavery that we don't like to think about it. But yes, there were cultures and societies and places where slaves essentially had other slaves. And we also don't like to talk about it, but there was hierarchy of slaves in the United States. And it's horrible because the whole system is horrible, but it existed. And so people, people even who are living in a horrible situation don't necessarily become heroes. Here it's not even taken into consideration because at the time the rabbis wrote this midrash was in circulation, it was a foregone conclusion that people had slaves. Nobody didn't have slaves. There wasn't a culture that was free of slavery. So the fact that there were slaves when the midrash was written, and again, maybe when the Jews left Egypt, is kind of disturbing, but it is the reality. What's so weird about this is that it also tells us that even for those people that were that low on the social hierarchy, didn't really matter, because it doesn't matter if you were Ezekiel who got to see the chariot of God, you got to see the Merkavah, you got to see like most of God, like the most that a person can see of God. Ezekiel, the prophet, got to see that hundreds of years later. But what he saw wasn't what these people saw. Even people that were like the lowest rung of society, they got to see more than what Ezekiel got to see. So if you think that Ezekiel got to see something, nothing compared to what people got to see at the Red Sea. So that's what's so wild about that statement. Not only, again, the hierarchy, but what it really means, which is that the Red Sea was like nothing else that had ever happened, and that it really has ever happened up until our day. That's what they're saying. Nothing like this was ever seen. No group of people got to see. Now, Moses gets to see God in a different way. We know that. It says that specifically, very explicitly. At the end of the Torah, many other places, it says that Moses gets to see God like no other person. But the average, every ordinary day people, they got to see God at the Sea of Reeds. They also get to see God at Mount Sinai. But it seems as though at the Red Sea, they saw more of God than they even saw at Mount Sinai. So that's pretty wild.
They closed the song with the words, "Let us set the crown of glory upon the head of our deliverer, who suffers all things to perish, but does not himself decay, who changes all things, but is himself unchanged. His is the diadem of sovereignty, for he is the King of kings in this world, and his is the sovereignty of the world to come. It is his and will be his in all eternity." Thereupon Moses spoke to Israel, "You have seen all the signs, all miracles and works of glory that the Holy One, blessed be he, has wrought for you. But even more will he do for you in the world to come. For not like to this world is the world of the hereafter. For in this world, war and suffering, evil inclination, Satan and the angel of death hold sway. But in the future world, there will be neither suffering nor enmity, neither Satan nor the angel of death, neither groans nor oppression, nor evil inclination."
Wow. So what again we get here at the end of this description of the song is, again, this song is nothing, the song is nothing compared to the song of the Messianic redemption, and what will happen to us in the world to come is not even like, what you just saw is nothing compared to what's going to happen in the world to come. And in the world to come, again, there's no war, there's no suffering, there's no evil inclination. There's no Satan and the angel of death and angel of destruction. There is no power that those things have over you. And again, Satan and the angel of death do God's work. And again, when we talk about why do angels who are doing God's work, why do they do bad things? Well, they're doing God's work. But there's a point in time when they won't be working anymore, when those angels no longer work. They're done. Their job's over. They're doing God's work. They don't really have a choice. But again, maybe they don't just like doing it because they don't like us very much. But again, one day in the world to come, won't really matter. There is no place for those things. So
As Moses and the race that wandered from Egypt with him sang a song to the Lord by the Red Sea, so shall they sing again in the world to come. In the world to come, all generations will pass before the Lord and will ask him who should first intone the song of praise, whereupon he will reply, in the past it was the generation of Moses that offered up to me a song of praise. Let them do it now once more. And as Moses conducted the song by the Red Sea, so shall he do in the world of the hereafter.
wow. So Moses will be singing the song for us in the world to come. So that's kind of cool that Moses is going to sing again when we're in the world to come. But it's not just Moses.
In other respects, too, it shall be in the world to come as it was at the time of the song by the sea. For when Israel intoned the song of praise, God put on a festive robe, on which were embroidered all the promises for a happy future to Israel. Among them were written, "Then shall your light break forth as the morning." Then said they among the heathen, "The Lord has done great things for them," and many similar promises. But when Israel sinned, God rent the festive robe, and he will not restore it or put it on until the coming of the future world.
Wow. So God has a special garment with our good things on it, with good things for us. Words are embroidered on his garment, things that will happen that are good. But God ripped it apart when we sinned. So will God get to put it back on? Yeah. But when that day comes, when we're going to be living in peace, and then God will put that robe back on. So it's kind of an amazing image of God putting on a robe of, again, like a coat of many colors, like, a coat of his party robe. And God gets to put it on in that day. And here again is what Miriam did.
After the men had completed the song, the women, under the guidance of Miriam, sang the same song to the accompaniment of music and dancing. The Israelites had had perfect faith that God would perform for them miracles and deeds of glory. Hence they had provided themselves with timbrels and with flutes, that they might have them at hand to glorify the anticipated miracles. Then Miriam said to the women, "Let us sing unto the Lord, for strength and sublimity are his. He lords it over the lordly, and he resents presumption. He hurled Pharaoh's horses and chariots into the sea and drowned them, because wicked Pharaoh in his presumption pursued God's people, Israel."
So this gets to the question of who sang what. Because it does say that Moses led the people in song, and Israel sang. Then later on, it says that Miriam led the people in song. Look, one can make the argument it's from two different authors, which some people have made that argument. It is interesting that it says that Miriam and the women led them with timbrels, which is instruments. The men didn't use instruments. It says the women did. So there is that interesting addition that the women, added instruments to it, which is kind of cool that they brought along their instruments and started singing. But again, there is this recognition that this is the song They're singing the same song. They didn't write a new song, which, again, it doesn't say that in the Torah necessarily, and it says that they sang the song. Assumedly, again, could be understood that they're singing the same song, and they sung a different song, that they sang the song in the first place, because if the original text was the song itself, the introduction to the song could have been put by an editor and not even in the initial, in the original text. And there could have been another tradition that Miriam led the people and the women in the song in the first place. Again, there's a lot of possibilities here. The traditional understanding that the men sang it first and then the women sang it, that's the understanding that most people have. And that's the way the order of the Torah says it. But again, there is an interesting thing that happens there, which is that Miriam's part introduces the narration, whereas the line about Moses leading the people in song comes before. It does come first, but it comes as an introduction to the narration. It isn't part of the poem itself. It's the introduction to the poem, not the introduction to the story. So it is interesting that it's Miriam's that is part of the actual. When it says Miriam led them in song, that's the actual narration. It's also interesting too that the song of Deborah is a woman's song as well. And so the idea that women are leading the people in song is kind of an interesting idea, and one that seems to be like there in the Bible, that women did lead the people in song. And there definitely is no issue with that. It's just a question of maybe who's saying first, who's being given credit for the song. But believe it or not, we're going to finish here. We'll start the text next week here. Believe it or not, okay, so we're done. We're done with the song. We're done with coming out. But of course, immediately in the same Torah portion, so chapter 15 is the Song of the Sea. Chapter 16 and 17, the Israelites are already starting to complain, which again, the rabbis have to recognize. I mean, they know this as they're writing this, is that this highlight of Jewish history is immediately followed by complaining. And so they know that, they understand that, they know that as they're writing the Midrash. They know that as great as this moment is, they have to kind of build up also this fact that they're going to fall, like almost immediately. So how can that even happen? How can that happen? So we're going to have some explanations, and that's what we're going to read next week. We're going to read the explanations for how did the Israelites go from being up here to literally moments later. Now, again, we know that there's some really bad things on the horizon. There's the golden calf incident, which is in the back of the rabbis' minds too, because they know that these Israelites who saw God in all series are going to get to the outside a few weeks later and give up on one idol. That's all. They know that. We know that. You know that. How does it happen? You'll see. You'll start to see it next week. So thank you very, very much, Rosemary, for leading us in.
You're welcome.
In this, and we are going to sing Thursday night at Purim. We gave you all song sheets so that you can sing along with the songs that Wendy and our singers leading us in the song, but you can sing too. And so even though most of the songs were composed, or not composed by Wendy, but the song parodies were composed by Wendy, it is an 80s theme. You can come an 80s theme to our Zoom. It is live. I would love to be there with us. And of course, tomorrow night we have Torah study. We'll be reading the Torah portions, which is about cool things were created for the Mishkan, for the tabernacle. And in the meantime, again, everybody keep hopefully getting vaccinated, staying healthy, doing what you need to do to stay healthy and to stay positive and be happy because it's Purim time. So come in costume, even if it's not 80s costume, come join us Thursday night to celebrate Purim. So thanks everybody for being with us, and make it a great day, everybody. Take care.
Take care.
Stay safe, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.